Hello and welcome to OCR Talk. My name is Jason Dupree and I have with me
Francesca Chiorando.
Francesca, thank you for joining me today. This is a very different episode of OCR Talk from what I've been doing for the past 2 years, where I've started recording in my drive away from a venue because I was there. I was doing some kind of live stream or some kind of other coverage, and I've been recording and talking about the technical side of all that stuff while driving back to the airport or whatever. This being different because you were on the technical side of the Spartan Ultra World Championships in Morzine, France, that just recently happened. You were part of the commentary team along with Martin, what's his last name?
Perrier.
Martin Perrier.
Like the water.
And I have to bring this up because I think a lot of people don't realize and know that you were on a show once upon a time called Spartan X. And it wasn't related to Spartan, but it was related to obstacle course racing. It was a British television show that was similar to, I can't think of any off the top of my head to say that they're similar to, but you guys had challenges that you had to do. So it was like a, what do you call it? A reality show. But you guys had challenges to do, and you had a castle and a campsite. And if your team or yourself won the challenge, you got to go sleep in the castle, have all the nice food, get pampered a little bit by the people that had to go sleep in the tent in the campsite.
The Exile Camp, it was called. Yeah, basically that. It was a sports game show. And there were 12 of us, 6 boys, 6 girls, 6 men, 6 women, and they kind of had 2 from each sport. And me and Matan met on that show. We were both from obstacle course racing. And straight away when we met, we got on. And I think anybody who saw the coverage the weekend saw that we just got on very well. And in fact, we've seen each other. I think we didn't see each other for about 7 years at one point, up until like last year or the year before. And then we've seen each other twice since then. But we just have a nice vibe. And we got on very well in the show. And it was great fun. It was so much fun. It was basically, it was horrific. There was no food. You had to sleep on the floor. You were always at risk of like getting kicked out if you didn't perform well enough. And very physical challenges and odd games. There was no voting each other out or any of those kind of tactics. It was purely based on physical skill. But the longer that you spent in the exile camp, the less food you had, the less sleep you had, and the more jobs you had to do. So the weaker you'd get, and in that camp you'd play games as to who would get kicked out. It was high stress and high fun. I loved it so much. It was, and that's where my kind of career into TV started, completely by accident. I got contacted by a casting director asking if I wanted to go on the show, and I was going through a bit of a crap time in life, so I took the risk, and the rest, they say, is history.
Well, I do. Obviously, we're going to get into the Morzine coverage, but if you don't mind, I'd like to dive into this side of about you a little bit more, because you have your own podcast, the OCRWC Podcast. You interview lots of other people, but and while you give little tidbits about yourself in that podcast, I think people don't know enough about you, and I think you're very much worth knowing about.
Thank you. I always feel like I talk about myself a lot. So I'm always like, oh my God, I'm saying this about myself again. People don't care. Because they have to hear the same me every week in, week out. Well, every fortnightly in, fortnightly out with a different guest. I always imagine people like, Guy, no, we just want to hear about, the person on the mic.
I think the person that is the best at not doing that is Will Hicks.
I was going to say Will Hicks. He is a man of mystery.
Well, he's also just a pro at interviewing people and not laughing and not interrupting when people are talking and not making it about himself.
Yeah, I terrible at interrupting. Sometimes I have to literally zip my mouth because I get overexcited. And yeah, I do that thing of, oh, I know what you're talking about because I have been there too. I did it yesterday. I spoke to Ida and Leon and they were talking about personal performance at a race, and sometimes that doesn't correlate to actually podium position. And I was like, yeah, well, the other weekend I did this. And they were like,
Well, I think of one of the reasons that most of us get into podcasting is to talk about ourselves a little bit because, it's enjoyable. So I definitely understand that myself because you get these relatable moments and it's like, oh, wow, I want to give my perspective and take on those such things. Will never does. He's very much the most professional person when it comes to that. I've even seen like when you're actually with him, podcasting, you can see, or not with him, like online, you can see when he laughs, he does laugh, but he just gets away from the mic and like tries to hold it in as best he can. So if you ever actually hear him laugh on one of his podcasts, it was extra funny. And he just couldn't help himself.
Yeah. I need to learn a bit of his ability to hold back. Because I know in every conversation I have, whether it's personal or professional, I always afterwards, I'm like, damn it, Fran, just be quiet for a minute. Just stop talking. But I do also think, the first conversation I ever had with Will Hicks was about doing coverage for World's Toughest Mudder. And he said to me, he's like, listen, you kind of are a bit notorious for not doing Tough Mudder and never having been a supporter of the brand. Why on earth would you be any good at doing coverage for World's Toughest Mudder? And I was like, well, listen, you're the expert on the brand. You know everything there is about the race. And that in itself is interesting because I can learn with you. But if there's one thing I can do, it's talk for 24 hours. And that's something that you definitely need. And it's
Yeah. And it's not like you didn't know obstacle course racing.
Oh, I know a lot about obstacle course racing, but that specific brand is a fair question to ask. But I could have all the information in my head. But yeah, being able to talk for that amount of time definitely helps.
So I'm going to bring it back around to you and your prior experience in just a second. But one of the things that I wanted to say about interviewing people that we can all be better about is not saying, acknowledging comments. Like there's a word for this when you're saying yes. Like, oh yeah, you're right. Like saying words to give them affirmation that you're listening to them. And obviously you can do that with physical nods and eye gestures and smiles and stuff like that as well. But we're all kind of bad about saying those words, and it, especially when you do it on Zoom, it overlaps and it usually kind of blurs out what they're saying because Zoom doesn't, these kind of platforms don't overlap. Like when two voices are overlapping, it makes it to where both of them are hard to hear.
I actually record on a double channel on Zoom. So then I
can do
myself out.
Yeah. And that definitely is better. And I know that it was for a long time, Zoom didn't have that. And eventually they added it in, and it's very helpful. I actually used to use Zencastr because they had that ability to record two separate lines.
I have noticed I'm not good at that. I've been doing a bit more like on-course short interviews with people taking part in races, and I watch them back and I'm like, oh my God, Fran. And, I'm trying to get into the habit of, because I used to do a lot of interviews with people and it would be that kind of, they don't want to hear my voice, but you want to encourage them to speak. So say it was over the shoulder, so the camera over the shoulder, you can just kind of see part of me. I'd be like not making the noise, but like being very encouraging. I'm listening to you. Carry on. This is good. It's a hard habit to get back into.
It is natural conversation. Most people are like, yeah. It's just hard to not do because it makes you feel like you're being rude, but you're really doing the professional thing is to give them all the audio.
Yeah, for sure.
So to bring it back to where you started in Spartan X, you got onto this show. It was awesome. You and Martin. You didn't know him before that, correct?
No. So it was filmed in Hungary, and all of the cast were international.
I didn't realize that. That's cool.
Yeah, filmed in Hungary, like a couple of hours out of Budapest in a place called Hologo. And all the cast was international. And we all stayed in different hotels the night before. And I didn't see anyone that in my hotel that was on the show. And I realized the next day 2 of us were staying there, but I hadn't seen her. And we the day started of the first day of filming, like in a minibus going round Hungary, picking everyone up. And they told me there was another obstacle course racer. And I'm like, oh, he's from France. So I was like, could it be Thomas Blanc? Because he was the only French obstacle course racer I knew. And I was like, oh my God, that would be amazing. I've known who Thomas is since I started in OCR. And it wasn't. It was Martin, but he got on the bus. And I just, when you just immediately make friends with someone. And like, I was really nervous. I was 29. Like, all these people were really fit and strong. And, if you know me, that one, I'm very white. I'm very white. I'm blue, which doesn't help an overall look of healthiness. And I'm also not necessarily the most muscular person in the world. And back then I was very skinny. Like, that was pre-baby. And I just didn't look like these people. And he did. I'm not saying that he looked like me, but I was a bit nervous. And, there were people from Brazil and India and then he got on the bus and I just saw him. I was just like, we're going to be friends. And we smiled at each other. We're like, yeah, we're going to be friends. And we just were from that moment. And it was great. And having that OCR connection was really good because I remember he asked me, he's like, do you know Fake Haley? And I was like, Fake Haley or Fake Kelly? I was like, doesn't matter. I know both of them. Which one? And there was just loads. And he'd been living in the States for a few years. So he'd done the OCR scene in the States. He'd done World's Toughest Mudder, Spartan, the whole driving to events every weekend and sleeping in your car. So we had so much to talk about. And yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah, as anybody in OCR knows, when you meet somebody else that is into OCR, you have that connection right away. There's so many like, oh yeah, I did that event and I did this and that, and you share the stories and everything. What events are coming up? What are you doing? All that good stuff. What are your goals? But yeah, so you guys were on that show together, and you're right. He was a smaller frame compared to some of the other guys on the show. He wasn't like a little rail or anything, but he definitely, because some of those other guys looked definitely more just like, not that they were bodybuilders, but just a bigger guys.
There were some big fellas, like big, strong looking fellas.
Yeah. So you guys were on that show, and then after that show, and you made it pretty far into that show, like, what, second to last episode, maybe? I forget exactly.
It was in the last episode. I didn't make it into the final 2 games. But I was in the last episode. And then we left. We went to Hungary and I asked to stay longer because I wanted to spend longer. There was no reason for me to come home. And I spent the night in Hungary. The 3 of us spent the night in Hungary walking around looking for food because we hadn't eaten. Like, we hadn't eaten anything for weeks. We also hadn't had any contact with home. There was no contact. It was 3 weeks. There was no music, TV, anything. There was nothing. We were totally isolated.
And so you were in the camp for the majority.
I was in the camp for the majority of the time. I maybe slept in the castle twice or something. And yeah, we spent like the evening walking around Hungary. Me and a girl called Annabelle and a guy called Devrath. And then that night, we all slept in separate rooms and we were texting each other like, I can't sleep on my own, because we spent 3 weeks sharing one giant bedroom or tent. And then the next morning, walking around breakfast, and me and Annabelle were just like, Ian, bread. And we were so excited that I got really skinny, like I lost a lot of weight. And then, yeah, I think it was Martin, was it Charlie? And Kevin made it into the final. And then they arrived in Hungary, and I was still there. I'd spend the day walking around, eating eclairs, drinking Coca-Cola, reading a book. Like, it was the best reintroduction into civilized life. It was crazy. And then we went out for dinner. And one of the things I think made us such close friends was we didn't know anything about each other. Like, I didn't know anyone's surname. We didn't find out that kind of stuff. We found out about each other. So about their childhood, about their family, about what was important to them, but not the usual kind of pastiming, how do you do kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. We got really into the stuff. And that night we ate dinner together and we just ordered a whole pile of food and everyone was eating from each other's plates. And I was like, this is so magical. Like, the experience itself of filming the show was great, but these connections with these people, I've never had that experience. And I feel so fortunate because, I don't know, it was just so special and unusual. But yes, I got it. I was in the last episode, but not the final games. I wasn't in the final.
Yeah, I think a lot of those shows, it's kind of hard to tell. Like, these people really go through what they're saying they went through. And sometimes I'm sure there's some movie magic, TV magic, a little leeway that they give. But you are, proof, unless they have an NDA that you're still holding by that you won't tell, but proof that, yes, you did sleep out there and do without things and all that stuff.
Yeah, I actually think, so one thing that was really good, which didn't make for great viewing, but was good for us, is they didn't manufacture anything. They didn't edit conversations to make it look like people were assholes. It was all very realistic, but the only criticism I would give is they didn't make it look as hard as it actually was. I can guarantee you, we all suffered way more than you saw. Like we were hungry constantly. Like the games were hard. It was hot. We didn't drink cold water. I mean, I didn't shower for like 2.5 weeks. Like it was way tougher than it looked. It was cold. Like it rained a lot. It was brilliant.
I've watched some I've read a lot of behind the scenes stuff of the Squid Games, the actual competition one. And they talk about like during red light, green light being in the same position for like 10 minutes because in between the red light and the green light, they were trying to get all these different shots. And so those people were having to hold that position. So it was, again, way harder than it looked on screen.
That's the thing. You are also filming a show, and anyone now, everyone has the opportunity to create content now. Anyone who does it realizes how long it takes to create content. And that was a big show with multiple cameras and drones and rigs. It wasn't small. It took hours to do a game that you see on TV for a couple of minutes. And it was, standing in the sun for all that time, not going to the bathroom. Again, it was brilliant, but it's not easy.
A lot of obstacle course racers that have been on the Steve Austin Broken Skull Ranch show have a lot of similar stories about just the behind the scenes. You're waiting a lot for different things. And I think Ninja Warrior is fairly the same thing. Like they record a whole season in one night. So you're watching these people in the crowd and it's like, for them, it's 4 a.m. or whatever. And you don't realize that on the show.
Magic of TV.
And they've done multiple runs in the same night. You'd think that they have traveled and came back and all that stuff. So, Magic of TV, you went on from that to 2 other shows?
Yeah, so it was literally as that show finished. We came out, me and a girl called Annabelle came out, and we had a cup of tea. They gave me a cup of tea. That was the first thing I had, because you all know how much I love tea. And it was a woman, so the broadcasters who made it, the channel, were a Dutch company. And there are a lot of women, very high, it's very fair in the Netherlands. And I love working with the Dutch. It was a woman, the head of the channel was a woman. And she said to me, she was like, I really liked you. Do you want to work with the channel? And I was like, well, this is bullshit. Like, of course that's not going to come. And I was like, yeah, of course, that'd be great. And they invited a couple of us to go to something called MIPCOM, which is in Cannes, which is like a TV convention, I guess, in a way. Like new programs are sold. And I really didn't think anything would come of it. But lo and behold, she went it. She offered me a contract. And the really funny thing is, I love these kind of cultural differences between people. One of the reasons they told me about a year later, one of the reasons why they offered me a contract was because they just liked how I was as a person. Their nickname for me was Friendly Francesca. Which is funny because a lot of Americans find me very rude, but the Dutch find me so friendly. And they liked the way I was on camera, but on the first day when we arrived in the minibus to play the first game, 12 of us, all competitors, apparently, I don't remember this, I made sure everyone got off the bus and everyone was okay. And then when we were playing the first game, I was still checking on people and I was like, I remember this, but cool, good. And yeah, so they offered me a contract and it did come about. So then the next year, we filmed that around September of 2015. And starting kind of January 2016, I was filming pretty much constantly for the whole year. I did 2 10-part series as a solo host. And then towards the end of the year, I did a 7-part sports game show with a co-host that was filmed over a very short period. And that was all with the same channel.
So I've seen the the two where you're a solo host, one being called Access All Areas, I believe. And the other one was like not Marvelous Machines, but something like that.
Well, the Ultimate Processes. It was about how stuff is made, which just, thrilled me so much. I just loved that kind of thing. I found and learned so many cool things. I went to different places. I tried stuff. I met people that I'm still friends with from doing that. It fascinated me. I found it super interesting. It was great. Both of them suited my personality, because the other one was about travel and finding out stories, finding out what makes places, and the other was what makes things, I guess.
And one of those episodes where you were traveling around the world, you were actually in New Orleans, which is where the area I'm from. So that was really cool to see as well.
That was one of my favorite episodes to film. I think that
you went down into the Ninth Ward, which is like an area as locals we don't go, just because of the crime and stuff. But so it was cool to see stuff that I didn't even really know about.
I was so lucky doing that, and I wouldn't have cared if nobody ever watched it or never went on television, because the experiences that I had were things that you would never get to do as a tourist or a traveler. Meeting people in low ninth, like seeing stuff, and it's not that it's voyeurism or morbid tourism. It's learning about people and learning about yourself as well. I had one. It was quite frustrating that the director on that show, me and him, didn't do so well. And there was one point I really wanted to do a piece to camera, and directors would learn pretty quickly. I had a different director for every episode. They'd learn pretty quickly not to script me and just to let me do my pieces to camera when I wanted to. And in that show, by the end, he'd kind of disappeared and given up. And one of my favorite pieces to camera was the final one on that show, on that New Orleans episode. But in that one, I was in a house talking to these young guys that basically their lives had been turned upside down by Hurricane Katrina. And I really wanted to say this because it was just because of where I was born, because of who I was born to, because of the color of my skin, that my life had been so brilliant. And these people were no less, I'm no better than they were. I'm no more intelligent. I'm no more charming. I'm no kinder. And yet our lives are so different just because of where we were born. And I think those experiences and learning those things helped me grow up an awful, awful lot. And I think that's a valuable thing to know and for other people to realize. Like, the world is vast, and even people in places like New Orleans where, it's America, it's the United States. No, life is still really hard through no fault of your own.
Yeah, like you're saying, getting to know those people. Yes, people from the outside might look at people from those types of areas and think that they're all bad and whatnot. But when you learn, even the ones that are bad, when you learn the why behind it all, it gives you a better understanding of the people, but also a little bit more comprehension of it. Mm-hmm. Gives you a little bit more grace when it comes to looking at people and how you perceive them. So very cool. A little tidbit, a little Easter egg here for those that are watching and listening to the Fran and Carlo Get OCR Adjacent show. Episode 6, I believe. We've been doing this goofy AI generated background and like your clothes in exact same picture of you guys over and over.
We don't have many pictures of us, so we stuck with the same one.
But the one for episode 6, the background I pulled out of that show, Access All Areas, of You in the Desert. So if anybody actually sees that, then that's you in that background.
It is me. It is me dressed up with a headscarf, turban, and Jabala in the middle of the Sahara Desert. That was also one of my favorite episodes to film. It's very different from the rest. It was a lot less scripted. I basically went to the Sahara Desert, discovered how hard it was, and trekked across it. And I loved Marrakesh. That was my first time visiting. I've been back another 2 times since then to different areas, and it's just a fantastic place.
And before I move on to Morzine and the coverage, those shows are all on a channel. Remind me of the name of it.
So the channel's called Insight. I think they then kind of branched out into different channels. I want to say it's called In Trouble now or something like that. But it's an interesting channel because it's an on-demand channel. So you can watch it online, but it's also on most streaming services on TVs like Samsung, etc. In most countries, just about every single day. Which I just find so weird that, like, I could go to any country and find one of my shows and watch me. And I always forget that. But yeah, they're available in places, and I've forgotten now because it's been so long.
Yeah, I was going to say, if anybody does want to watch it, you can go to the Insight TV website and you can get a subscription for like, I don't know, $2 for the month or something like that. Yeah. And you can watch all the episodes there. Or you can go to any of the streaming platforms that have like just a list of channels that you can scroll through. And Insight TV is one of them that you can find episodes of your stuff on there.
Yeah.
And there's a few tidbits on YouTube that you can go.
Yeah, the clips here and there. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So then just a real quick transition here. You went from doing that kind of stuff. You did a little bit of video game mocap for Bethesda. Your mocap is in Star. I'm video game person. Starfield. Yep. Yeah. I was wanting to say a different game because I'm too deep into video games, but Starfield. So that's pretty awesome. And at the same time, you started working with OCRWC, and you've been doing podcasts for them, for you guys, for quite some time now. When did you start that one?
So yeah, I started with OCR. My time in TV came to an end when I had a baby. Not in an unkind way. They treated me incredibly well and incredibly nicely, but they just kind of said, we can't use you if you're pregnant. We were going to stick you on roller coasters and stuff, but we can't do that. And by the time I was ready to come back, they kind of shifted how they were programming. So I was like, right, okay, life shift for me. And during that point, I started working for OCRWC. I think 2017, I started with them. Or it might have been early 2018, just doing content, writing blogs, etc. And that kind of slowly built. And then we did a post-production broadcast with OCRWC in 2018 from London. And then the next year we started trying to live stream, which was interesting. And then it was during COVID, I decided to start the OCRWC podcast because nothing was really happening. None of us were doing anything. So I was like, this is a good time to start this. Why not? And it helped me to get to know athletes. It kept me involved in doing things. I had still a reasonably small child, and plus, it's COVID, so I wasn't going anywhere. And it was during that time as well that I started working for Epic Games, doing the motion capture, which was a very odd job, but a very good job for a couple of years. And also one of the weird things, because I don't know how I feel about AI. We've had this conversation a bit. I kind of sold the rights to all of my face to them for MetaHuman. So anybody who uses MetaHuman, they'll see that it's an animation tool. There's like a whole bank of skin colors, skin textures, eye colors, facial movements. The amount of time I sat in a booth talking and moving my mouth and seeing how stuff would move, and then that's all fed into a machine to build characters, which feels kind of weird. But at the time,
do you feel like you were compensated appropriately for that?
No, definitely not. I actually said that when I got the job, but it was kind of a tricky time in life, and I very much needed the job. But I was like, the buyout's not great, because I don't know if you know how things work in TV and adverts. It's normally the buyout where you make the money. So say if you filmed an advertisement, you would maybe get paid like a couple of grand for the couple of days of filming. But the buyout is where you make the money. And you can have buyouts of like 28 grand a year, depending on how many countries it's sold in. And that's for a mediocre advert. And that's where you get the money. And if they want to use it in perpetuity, you get a lot of money because they're using it constantly. And the buyout was very, very small. And I was like, the buyout is low. And they're like, well, everyone else is happy with it. So if you're not happy, I was like, shit, no, don't argue, don't argue. I'm not good at negotiating. So I just went with it. And then I was like, yeah, I really screwed myself there. But as well, at the time, I really needed the money. I needed a job, and it was kind of saved my ass. So it's okay.
I've always found that very interesting because when you give permission to say, I'm going to take this chunk of money and then you get to do whatever, it may never go anywhere and they may never make more money off of it. But if they do make a lot of money off of it, well, you've signed away your rights to get royalties off of that later on. And I've even seen that in other games like GTA where, the person that was in the game, GTA obviously goes on to make billions and billions of dollars, but they only get the cut that they got whenever, that's the kind of contract you sign. So I guess the thing to say is anybody out there that's in such a role, try and see if you can get some kind of royalties along with your...
Yeah. And I've never worked with an agent. I've always worked by myself. And I'm fine with that. And I've enjoyed not being agented. But even the actors who were on that role, who had agents, were in the same position as me. I'm about to tease.
God bless you. Salute.
Merci. Everyone was in the same position. And I suppose especially in Manchester, those kind of jobs are really hard to come by. But I suppose in the States it's better because you have, is it SAG-AFTRA or something? The union, which we don't really have as much.
Yeah, it's tough whenever people are vying for the job, and everybody's kind of getting undercut.
Yeah.
So if you make waves, they're going to be like, we'll just get somebody else.
Yeah.
That's tricky.
Okay. So then I moved into OCRWC and started kind of working for them more and more, and that built up in the last couple of years. And even though I've been in OCR since like 2013, and I started blogging and doing all that stuff that we all do, it was like 21, 22 when I really started to build my role more within the sport.
I'm going to go ahead and ask you if we should go ahead and move on to more zine stuff, because we've been talking about you for quite some time.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Is your time frame, like, are we okay if we go over a little bit, or do you need?
Yeah, we're okay. I'm speaking with Carlo at 10, so we got a while.
Okay, great. Because I wanted to say that my starting of live streaming was watching your stuff at OCRWC 2019, and this is at the time frame where Spartan kind of had died out of their live streaming. And so there's like no races getting live streamed at this point. Somebody needs to do it. Let me see if it can be done for cheap, because Spartan, the reason why they stopped was because it costs so much money to do it at a high level, which is understandable, but they didn't find it to be sustainable that way. So I was looking into how cheap can we get with this? Like, is Facebook Live worth it to just do that? A single camera? It's okay, but can we get a little bit better and still keep it cheap? So I started looking into OBS and doing a little bit of graphics that way. And during OCRWC 2019, I woke up early, because you guys were doing that in London, like 2 a.m. and started finding content from the race and pulling it into a live stream that probably had no viewers at all. And was just trying to share, let me kind of pull in everything together so that people in the States can get an idea and see the race as best as possible. So I think I probably pulled in some Instagram videos, like I watched Shaw's live stream, and so that was it was so funny because I just had no idea that I would ever meet you, for one. And then in 2022, because you couldn't go to 2021 OCRWC because of COVID stuff, and 2022, when you did, you were the person who was kind of managing the media people, including myself, and you helped me get things set up. And I don't know when it finally hit me. I really honestly couldn't tell you. It's like, that is the same girl for one. Actually, I learned that it was you from OCRWC Podcast because Mike Stefano with Also Running Adventures had interviewed you, a week or so before that, I think. So, and it was probably somewhere in that I was like, that's the girl from the OCRWC live stream, and the because you were in the post-production edit too, from 2018. I was like, holy cow, that's cool. So we
happens with me. Like, I am spread across many, many, many things, and people don't actually realize. And I'm fine. Like, I don't need anyone to know who I am. I've never done anything I've done for people to know me. I've done it because I've really enjoyed it. So I don't care. Like, that might sound rude, but I'm okay with that. But then when people connect the dots, I'm like, but you're like, you're here as well? And why are you ever, what, how? And I'm like,
I think it really shows in your television shows that you were on, because you were just so natural in those, and it didn't seem like you were there to share, not to talk about yourself. It was really well done.
I think me and Will both have that same attitude, and I know it's not true of everyone's. For some content, the purpose really is the person. They are the celebrity. They are the reason why you're watching it. But I've always seen myself as a conduit. Like, I'm there to deliver information. That's what I do. I deliver information, whether it's through marketing or commentary or podcasting. I give what is here to other people. And they're not interested because it's me. They're interested because I have that information and I can give it to them. And that's genuinely how I see my role. And I'm very, very happy with that. That's what I want.
I think the all obstacles videos that I create are kind of funny thing, because I don't necessarily want it to be me, but I'm the one doing the obstacle. So it's like, it kind of makes sense. So it's weird that it's like, I'm not trying to make the obstacle videos all about me, but that's just the way it is. So. But hopefully I'm decent at obstacles, so hopefully people get to...
You are. Like, there'd be no point in me doing them because I'd fall off half of them. And you have fun reactions, like the slide at War X. I laughed myself. I laughed so much watching that. It was so good.
Oh, all right. Yes, so let's fast forward and get into... fast forward a little bit. You've done some commentary for Spartan Europe in a few different instances, not Spartan World Championships, but like the European Championships, and I think maybe some of the UK series races, possibly.
Not the UK. So I've done the European Champs and the Trifecta World Champs. So they were like kind of one after the next. And then I've not done the Spartan World Champs in Abu Dhabi, and I want them. I want the collection. And then the next year, I wasn't able to do the Trifecta World Champs because it was held the same weekend as World's Toughest Mudder, and I'd already committed to World's Toughest Mudder by that point. So, I mean, this year, there's no word of whether I'm doing it or not, but they're not on the same weekend. So, fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yeah, we're very, very lucky and, just thankful to have you at World's Toughest, because obviously it's fun to hang out with you too, but to have your talent on the live stream is exceptional.
I just find that so wild because I'm like, I just sit there and talk like an idiot. Like, okay.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where when you have somebody that doesn't do it as good, it really shows.
Right.
And when you have somebody that does it well, you just don't notice. And that's the point.
Yeah, fair. No, that's fair. Like you doing obstacles versus me doing obstacles. We can enjoy the obstacles when you do them and enjoy how they work. Whereas when you would see someone who's less good, you'd be like, oh.
Okay. You always get the comments on, you always get people commenting on the pieces that are not as good as they could be. So that would be pretty funny to see comments of people being like, could you get somebody that is better at obstacles for these videos?
Yeah. Yeah, so I started doing my commentary with Spartan European Champs. That kind of came about because I had done a stadium race post-production video when Rakuten were the sponsors, and they hired me to do this video with a guy called Anthony Dubois, who is I don't know what his job title is, but he's a videographer extraordinaire in Europe, and we worked together on that. And then, it was a year, 2 years later, he contacted me. He was like, we're going to do this. Are you interested? And I was like, holy heck, yeah, why the heck not? Let's try it. And from there, I've worked with him a few times. And I mean, anyone who's watched it has seen him and his rabbits are just spectacular.
Yeah. And not that he would listen to this, but if he does, we want to work with him. We just got to get past language barrier. And,
yeah, I find it so interesting. And I said this to him at the weekend. And I've said this to you multiple times. You guys and those guys kind of approach it from a different aspects. So bringing the two of you together would work well because they are a team of athletes who are rabbits. Anthony he is an athlete, but he's also a videographer by trade. And then he has a collection of rabbits who are athletes. At the Mausian World Champs and at every race that I've covered, the rabbits each have an athlete to follow, and they run that whole time. So any point that you're not seeing picture is because either there's a technical problem or the cameras run out of battery, which is also a technical problem. But there are rabbits constantly running with every athlete. And then they use an external production company to produce the technical stuff. OCR Report comes at it from a different way, which is you guys are the producers and get people into rabbit. So yeah, bringing the two of them doing two of you guys together would just be so spectacular.
Yeah, seems like it's just the perfect match. Right. Just gotta try to make it happen. So Morzine, like you said, they had this awesome rabbit team, and they also had an outside production company. Am I correct in saying that it was like a local TV station that helped with this?
Yeah, I don't know whether it was a big or small TV station, but I think it's called TV8.
And we'll preface this in saying that you obviously didn't do the production yourself and probably don't know all of the ins and outs. But we're going to try and extract as much technical information out of you that you may have crossed by and seen. So TV station comes in. Did they have a truck or a satellite dish, or do you know what they brought to the table?
So let me kind of preface.
Did they bring a table?
They brought a table. This is the first time working with this crew. Previously, for the other races I'd done, I wasn't on site. So I was in the past in a studio in a place called Rouen, which is like an hour and a bit out of Paris. So whether the race was happening in London or it was happening in Athens or wherever, I was in a studio. And they had all the technical stuff in there, and the feed would come to them. We had a green screen. It was all super fancy, super snazzy, and it would go out. This time was the first time I was doing it with Spartan on site with you guys, unless it's, if it's a big race, we're on site. But when it's been small races, obviously commentators do it from home because, money's a thing that exists and time. So they were doing all of the camera feed on site, but the production itself was off site. So the on site, there were two of us. We had two streams, a French one and an English/French one. Martin is French.
Sitting near each other?
We were kind of sitting, a couple of meters away from each other. We were on the deck overlooking the finish line, and we were spaced away from each other, each with an individual camera setup, each with a table, and possibly with like our own sound guy, because our guy was with us the whole time. And there was a producer there. So he would be running the cameras, of which there were two, and which one overheated at one point.
And y'all were far enough away and with nice headsets.
Didn't hear a thing. I mean, so loud there, but no idea what they were doing.
So you said that he was running, the producer was running the cameras. What kind of camera setup did they have for you guys?
iPhones. So yeah, it was the cameras were, we had our desk. We actually had two laptops each in front of us. One was our personal one because me and Martin, over preparers, we built a whole deck out for ourselves with tons of information. People are always like, oh my God, how do you remember all that information? I'm like, babe, I don't. I do not remember any of that. I could be saying Thibaut Jean for 9 hours. It gets to the end of the race and I'm like, like I panic like a rookie. So I've always got everything in front of me. So we had one screen. It was like a bigger laptop with what was happening, what is being pushed out. So you can constantly see what's being pushed out. That includes the camera feed. So I only see one camera. When I work with you, we have multiple camera feeds, which I like seeing multiple cameras because it helps as the commentator to slightly direct. And I know that's not okay, but I'm a control freak.
If you had a full team with a director that was camera switching, that would be different. But with me, I'm one person doing several jobs, so it is important, I think, to have the commentators, because otherwise,
if anybody watched the full stream, they would kind of hear me and Martin at times be like, maybe it would be interesting to see something rather than baby right now. So the table, we had 4 laptops on the table and a sound deck, microphones, and then headphones and microphones. And then the setup was we were in a little tent and there were 2 iPhones, but we lost one at one point, so I'm not sure why there were 2. Maybe one was a backup. and a little bit of lighting, because the sun, we kept having to like block the sun and move the sun. It looked reasonably simple, but I know that doesn't mean it is simple.
Yeah. You talk about lighting. That is something that just really people probably don't think about. Like my coverage of Valle de Bravo not long ago is a perfect example of how I was under a shade, but it was daylight behind me, so I was very dark. And if you put a light on me, it would make me bright, but also keep the background normal, as opposed to just brightening it up to where I'm lit, but the background would be blown out. So I actually did that for War X, where I didn't do it at first, but halfway through the race, I did it to where I made myself lit, but the background starts to get blown out like that. So, but yes, so you had the iPhones. Any idea what they were running on the iPhones, app-wise?
Do you mean? I mean, I know on the computer that I was looking at, they were using Grabio.
Okay.
Does that mean anything to you?
It does. It does. That's a platform that I've actually talked to. The sales guy that I've talked to about their product, where we were chatting, he had planned on doing a Spartan race or something at some point. Like he had one scheduled in the future, which is pretty cool. Their platform sounds really cool because it's got a whole thing. It's all cloud-based, and it's got a whole thing where so you've got the regular show happening, and you can have somebody else grabbing snippets from the show and pushing it out to social media as the show is happening.
Okay.
In whatever format you need, whether it's, portrait or landscape, straight out to. So really cool. You can have instant social updates about the races as well.
I'm not sure if that's happening, but yeah, that's what I saw. I remember seeing that and thinking.
Yeah, it's probably something where you pay additional for that piece of it too, but it is a cool product that they have.
I mean, those things though, the streaming services, I know we used Dazzle for OCRWC in 2018, and even back then it was a couple of $1,000s for a couple of hours. And we didn't pay that amount because I've told the story before, but the servers in France dropped. It doesn't seem to be French-based, these things. Servers in France dropped just as the male athletes got to like the main obstacles that were coming into the big tent. And I was like, cool, no coverage. And we also hadn't. It was a mess. I will admit it was a total mess. I will still stand by the fact, though, considering I had no idea what I was doing and that we were totally misguided, not misguided personally, but misinstructed on what kit to use. It wasn't a terrible live stream, despite what it looked like. But yeah, so we didn't end up paying that amount. We got a hefty discount on the bill, but that was expected. 2018, a couple of grand in the UK and France. I'm just going to point out, the UK and France is a lot cheaper than the USA. So these things are really expensive, and there's I always say there's so much stuff that goes into doing so much that people don't realize, like the amount of costs, the technical knowledge, the small little bits of stuff that you got to have and be prepared for. Like even just what program you're running off and how many thousands of dollars are you paying for that?
So yeah, I've looked into all these different things, and it is easy to be like, your product sounds great and it'll probably help us a ton, but man, it's just not something that we can afford right now. So Grabio would be a good option for us. But yeah, it costs a lot. So cool. They had Grabio. So more than likely the phones themselves had an app that was going straight to Grabio as well as y'all's cameras, or your laptops was a return feed from the live show as well. And your mics.
On the laptop, we had what was being pushed out live. So there was like a 3 or 4 second delay on what we saw on the laptop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, similar to what we see, in our productions as well. You had the headsets. I saw you could see a mixing board that the headsets were plugged into. Any idea where the mixing board went? Did it go into a laptop? Like, what was its output to? Another laptop? To the phones? Not sure.
Must have been to the phones because there was only the 2 laptops. There wasn't another one that I saw.
That would make sense if the phone was using, the phone was the
recording
straight. Yeah. So if you'd probably have to have a splitter so that you could have power into the phone and the audio coming.
There were a lot of wires coming out of the phone, and I know because at one point we lost the cameras, and it was as I think the second place woman was coming in, and I was like, "Can we move our camera to look over and see the finish line?" And I looked at all the wires, I was like, "Forget about it." I didn't realize though probably what I was seeing on the screen in front of me can't have been what was the live feed because there was delay. Because if it was, then my sound would have been like 3 seconds then delayed on top of it. So there was a delay to what I was seeing, but then there must have been another delay to what was being pushed out.
Yeah, when it showed you guys, you weren't seeing your mouths word for word, right? Yeah. And this makes me think about World's Toughest last year when the camera that we had on the finish line, the hotspot that it was running off of, had run out of data like hour 23 or something like that. So the finish line camera went out, and I was out on course, and y'all were like, Jason, come in and help. And y'all took y'all's camera that was on you and turned it to the finish line. And it was a great, impromptu adjustment there.
That's a great thing about being on site as well. You can do things like that. And when it's slightly more, because someone from Spartan, when we were talking about the live stream, and they were all very happy with it, but they kind of said, it wasn't as professional looking as we've had in the past in the studio. I was like, I get that. It wasn't, technically. But I can tell you that doing an hour and a half coverage in that studio setting where you kind of, you're very upright and this is all, and you're constantly on, is exhausting. And I was like, there's no way I could have done 10 hours like that. Like having this it felt more casual, worked better for the race. I would not have got through. I mean, and at times, because it was 10 hours and stuff was happening constantly, like it was very hard to take a break. We managed to get like a 15-minute pee break, like 6 or 7 hours in. But you've got to have that forgivability of being able to relax a little bit. Otherwise, you're just gonna absolutely wear out. And that sounds crazy because all you're doing is sitting there chatting. But it's a long time. But also being on site, I think it adds to the atmosphere, and you can solve problems. If you're not there with the stuff, you can't fix it.
Also, being an ultra race, having that more relaxed atmosphere, I think fits the race as well. I love World's Toughest where it's middle of the night and there's not a lot going on. So you guys are just chatting about whatever. If there's not action to watch at the moment, you guys are just chatting about smell of tires and stuff like that.
My favorite. Which is where Mayan and Carlo's OCR adjacent came from, was chatting rubbish, basically. Because we found out we quite enjoy it.
Yeah. So, all right. So you got the camera on you guys, your laptops where you're only seeing one camera instead of a multi-camera setup, which makes sense, again, because they had producers behind the scenes. Audio probably going into the camera. You guys probably didn't hear the sound from the cameras on course, right?
Yeah, so unfortunately we didn't. The sound that we had was each other and the producer. So we also had WhatsApp going because we had our laptops in front of us so we could have WhatsApp. And sometimes when you're in the middle of an interview and then you've got somebody, and as well the producers were French, so their English was okay, but it's tricky. You can probably tell at times I probably didn't do it as good as I normally can. You're in the middle of talking and someone's in your ear going, and in 3 minutes you can launch VT2 and you can talk about this. And you're there going, yeah, so tell me more about it. Absolutely, that's really interesting. Yeah. And it gets a bit... But one of the problems, I'd say this is one of the problems we did have, anytime there was an interview, or anytime there was on course, we didn't hear what was happening. So there was a guy called Francis doing finish line interviews, and there was a guy called David Labrosse, who's one of the rabbits and also an athlete. He had done pre-event interviews, and he was on course. We had no idea what he was saying. That was a sound issue. We just couldn't hear it, and they tried to adjust it, and they couldn't. So they'd do an interview with someone, and sometimes, if we were lucky, we would hear a little bit. So we'd be like, oh, it was interesting how so-and-so said this about this. Sometimes we're just sitting there going, yeah, I know.
Sometimes you would hear it?
Sometimes we would hear it and sometimes we wouldn't. So there were some things that we got like really interesting tidbits, and some bits like, maybe if you were watching at home, you would have been going, well, he just said this. Why are you not talking about that? Or why are you asking this question? You just got that information. didn't know.
I honestly thought that you guys wouldn't have been able to hear anything, because thinking about the setup, if your audio is going through a mixing board and going into a phone, the phone, it's got to have power and it's got to have an audio input, but the output, how would the output go back to the mixing board? Because you can easily have from Gravio, I'm sure you can have return audio, which means whatever is on the live stream, they can return that to you guys, but minus the your audio, your mics.
Yeah.
Even though that's going on to the output, it's like two different channels. So you got a main channel that all the audio's on, well, not all the audio, not the producer's audio. The camera's audio and y'all's audio would be on, and that goes out live. And then there's a different channel that is just you guys and the producer, and hopefully the cameras that would be on that channel as well, so you could hear those. But you're saying you heard it sometimes, but not others. That's very interesting to me.
Yeah. So we had the producer, we had that. And yeah, there was just seemed to be a problem with the sound, where sometimes it would come through and sometimes it would just, what it would sound like was someone doing this. And then sometimes it turned off and back, oh, this is so loud. And yeah, I don't know what was going on there. And this is the problem with being on site, even with a TV company. This is a TV channel and this is what they do. There are still going to be problems that, unless you're bringing in massive trucks and wired-in stuff and tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment.
And you test days and days before.
I can guarantee you, every live stream I've done, there have been problems. We've lost cameras, we've lost sound, we've heard things in the wrong, even in the studio setup, which is permanent, there were problems with sound and where you're hearing stuff and who's hearing what and which person we're hearing. It is such a complex game that looks so simple. And I think because we all have accessibility to our phone and we can live stream on TikTok and Instagram, we think, well, this is simple. We know what we're doing. It's meant. I'm not even going to start to try and understand the technical aspects of it, because there's so much that I don't know.
Well, the moment you introduce a second, like with anything, the moment you introduce a second variable, it gets infinitely more complex. And then when you introduce, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 variables, then it gets really crazy, because each variable has to be considered of each other. Yeah. I did notice that from the French company that you guys worked with for the European Champs last year, they actually use vMix, which is the same production platform that I use. And thinking about how you guys were in a studio, they were possibly running vMix on site, whereas I did that previously, but I had too many issues, especially when being on site, that I decided to start using a cloud computer. So the production machine is just the computer that I'm remoting into, whether I'm home or on site. And so it sounds like this team is basically doing the same thing, whereas their platform is actually just a cloud platform. They're not using a cloud machine that has software installed on it. It's just a cloud. They're logging into a website to do all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what their production setup looked like, but I'm assuming it's kind of a studio setup similar to what I was doing with the other guys. Just rather than us being on site on a green screen with them in their studio, we're an extra camera feed that they
right. But even in the studio, all what they're using with that particular platform is all just cloud-based stuff. Even though they're in the studio, it's still just going through a website to, utilize those programs, that software. Okay. The rabbits. The production team. Yeah, they were just, so the cell phones, do you know if they had a router that, or a Wi-Fi or some other internet that the cell phones were connecting to?
I know they had Wi-Fi because I connected to it, and the tech guy that was with us gave me the password. So I'm going to say yes. Okay,
so their cameras on you guys were on some sort of Wi-Fi there, whether hardwired or not, some kind of internet connection, going back to the machines. And that's normal. They weren't just going straight out of the phones, sounds like. The rabbits, looking at the show, at times you can see them. They're carrying One of them, it might have been, I don't think it was Thomas. It was the one that talked on camera. David. Say it again.
David Labrosse. David Labrosse.
He, excellent, like on course guy, like Steve Hain level. Love it.
Oh, he's a lovely human as well. I adore him. I all of the team that I know, I adore. I think they're fantastic, but I always have a soft spot for French people. So.
Well, I noticed that he actually had a gimbal with a thumbstick that you could use to adjust the camera. So I don't know what was on his gimbal. There was just times where you could actually see it, his thumbstick. I don't know why, but the other rabbits, you could see that they had a very, very small handle, like big enough just to fit in their hand. And then on that was a GoPro. As far as I could tell, it wasn't a gimbal because it wasn't something like, it was just the gimbal, the GoPro is attached, and that's it. It's not going to move and adjust as you move. And then the GoPros, being these newer GoPros, they had media kits on them. So they actually had a microphone, a bigger microphone that comes off of it, and maybe a light that was on top of it. I'm not 100% sure. And then on top of that, they had a mount, because these new GoPros are awesome. They've got, basically you can shoe in all, like when you look at a camera, like a big old digital camera, DSLR, and you put a flash on top of it, it's got a little slot that it goes into called a shoe. And so you shoe it in. So on top of that, they actually had a phone that was acting as a monitor for them. So they had the GoPro with the phone on top of it. This was very interesting to me because I know one of the ways to get live footage out of a GoPro is it goes through the GoPro app on the phone. While you're doing that, I can't say if I've paid attention to the fact that you can use the phone as a monitor. I didn't really think about that till just now.
So this is the problem that we had with Dazzle back in 2019, was that we had been advised and prepared to live stream through GoPros and the GoPro app. So I prepared all my rabbits. I'd hired, begged, borrowed, and stolen, I didn't steal anything, GoPros for everyone. And when we tested it and it worked okay, but it was dodgy. And then when it came to the day, it just didn't work. You know, we had our own Wi-Fi. We tested on site because it was at Nuclear, and Jojo, who I was working with, actually lives right next to Nuclear. And when it came to the day, the GoPros just wouldn't connect. They would not connect to Dazzle. So we had to last minute use phones. We had a couple of, like, one person had a gimbal. I managed to get to Argos in the morning and buy a gimbal. You know, most of it was like, and people were so mean. They were like, "Oh my God, have you ever heard of stabilization?" I was like, "Oh my God, have you ever thought of putting it on?" So I've kind of always put GoPros to the back of my mind as a possibility after that horrific experience that was honestly gave me nightmares for years in the lead up to OCRWC, like starting from about May onwards. And you know this because we became friends because I would email you at 3 a.m. Because I'd wake up in a hot, cold sweat, like, I forgot everything, I'm not prepared. Because of this experience of like things not working and about to be going live. So GoPros have never really been a consideration for me for live streaming.
It's funny because I tried, probably in 2019 to live stream from my GoPro, and I remember tried it out for like 30 minutes before the race and all was good. And then when the race came time, it was like 5 minutes. Oh, cuts out. No, too bad. You don't get to. It was like the women take off and then it was gone. It's just so frustrating. And that was a GoPro 7, which was one of the first ones, I think, that had live streaming. So now that they're up to a GoPro 12, I need to revisit it because I have one and I need to see if it actually looks worth a dang at this point. So I am very curious what they were doing. Were they just using the GoPro app, or did they have something else? Because I also noticed that they had like a running, like a hydration vest, and in the back, you can see something to stuff back there. Any idea if they had any kind of technical device back there?
Yes, I think from what I understand, from what I've heard from the old production company that I was with, they used is it cellular bonding? Mm-hmm. Like something to boost their, because I mean, these guys are up in the mountains. They're getting really far away from civilization. And yeah, it's a ski resort in Europe, so yeah, coverage is kind of okay, but still, they always do pretty well with coverage. They don't seem to have the problems that we have, the OCR report. That's weird because I always say we, but I work with both of you guys, which is also weird. They don't seem to have the coverage problems that OCR report gets, and I think it is because of this technology, which again, I'm not going to pretend to understand, but yeah, it's something to do with boosting signal, but again, it's complicated and very, 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 very expensive.
Yeah, so you say that they don't have the same experiences that we had or the same issues, but in reality, you watch the show and there's still lots of times where the video is, it either stops for moments at a time, or it's very, very pixelated, or there is another shot.
We're talking, I don't know how many rabbits, but at least 6 plus a drone.
Oh, they had 6? Okay, cool.
Well, there was normally a rabbit on the top 3 athletes. That's normally what on a rabbit on each athlete and a drone. So even if it's 4 in a drone or 5 in a drone, that's a lot of rabbits. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of feeds coming in. We've had races where we've had 3 rabbits, and if you lose 2 of them and you're left with 1, and that picture is, and even some of those pictures were iffy. You know, there were times when we were looking at it, and Matan, being an ultra runner and an ex-OCR athlete and living in Europe, you know, he knows these people well, that he's friends with a lot of these athletes, and we were just kind of like, this picture's not good enough for me to pick out who these are. And I know that people at home are like, oh my God, how do you not, this is your job, why do you not know? I can't see the picture that's coming to me. So even then, with all of that technology, it's I say this about OCR all the time, it's really early days, and we're used to having ultra 4K HD on our TV screens, but that's not the reality for broadcasting off the side of a mountain.
Well, even when you watch some of the older Spartan stuff that was really good, their camera shots was a lot of drone footage and like really far away, and just a static camera that was looking across a field and stuff like that. You didn't get a ton of rabbit stuff because of the same situations. So these guys sounds like a device that it's possible that the GoPro was going straight into that, because a GoPro has an HDMI output. And so I'm very curious, how did it split and go to that device too? Or was it simply the phone was hotspotted, like a Wi-Fi hotspot to that device?
Yeah, it could be that.
So it's like it's one or the other. It's either the camera signal is going out of the phone or it's going out of the device, but the device is helping. Sorry, it's either going out of the device or it's going out of the phone, but the device is helping bring in internet for the phone to use.
I wish I had more information for you on that, but I don't know.
But yes, those devices, wherever they are, definitely helps a lot, and they are very much expensive. So that's like the next thing that we can do to help make live streams of OCR better, but it's a big jump in cost.
Yeah, from what I understand, it's a huge, huge jump. And whilst it's one of those chicken and egg situations, isn't it? Which kind of happens a lot in OCR. It's like you can't justify the investment without the need for it. I know we have the physical need, but nobody's buying it. But you can't expect to sell the product unless it's a higher level. And
it is possible to rent those devices. There are companies that do that. So that's something to look into as well, that I have looked into as well. LiveView is one of the companies that does such devices, but they also have an app called LU Smart that is, it's basically like the apps that we use to live stream from phones, but the app itself can do cellular bonding. So if you have an extra internet connection, like a Wi-Fi hotspot, it will combine that and the cell phone connection, and it uses their own proprietary protocols, video protocols, that is supposedly better at carrying the signal. Now, another thing, a piece to all that is when you use a LiveView device, a lot of times the data that you have to buy with it's not just regular your cell phone's priority. It's like just below the police and ambulance priority as far as cell phone coverage goes. So that's a bonus that you get when you pay that extra money too.
I think just by the way you describe that, we can understand how much extra money that
is. Yeah. So I'm going to look at, I think the cheaper options out of all those is LU Smart, because it's just an app, but it uses their cloud technology and stuff too. So it's a little bit cheaper because you don't have to buy an extra device. So that's what I'm actually would love to be able to use for World's Toughest.
Right.
So we'll see. Yeah, they had the drone. That was pretty cool.
Drone is cool. I mean, some of those shots.
Oh yeah, it was gorgeous. And even those, you see at times where it's flying around and you get like a stutter, and
drones die, drones disappear, drones cut out. Like, technology is not infallible.
We do hope to have drone at World's Toughest this year too.
I would love to learn how to fly a drone. You know, I'm fascinated by what you do. I love World's Toughest, where I get to play about with the deck and press buttons, and like normally I'm sitting here and then Will is here and you're there, and I don't know why that's the way we sit. And then I was like reaching across Will, like, and then a couple of hours, and he's like, boop, 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 boop. So
yes. This year, we definitely want to make it as comfortable and accessible as possible for you guys. And this is a very, very different thing that we do for World's Toughest, where you guys, I go rabbit, you guys change cameras, show graphics, and even change audio at times. So yeah, it's very cool that you guys get to do that job and I get to go run.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be able to do it on a sprint or even a super, but because it's 27 hours of coverage, we have the time to mess about and play and maybe get it a bit wrong, and there's so much time to talk. It's such a different game, like doing a long race like that. It's good fun, and it's nice because you get to talk about what you see happening and what you think is interesting. And another thing that I really enjoy with the OCR report coverage is the getting the comments in from Facebook and YouTube and being able to talk to people, because that's a really huge thing. Like, you want to be able to interact with people. And we do some really fun things that we want to plan for this year. Like, we always talk about stuff. I don't know if, you made a list, didn't you? I need to get involved in it. But like, every year we're like, this is how we would improve. This is how we're going to make it a better experience. It's so fun. I love doing that coverage so much.
Yeah, we've actually started keeping track of those ideas this year, so we can be on it ahead of time and actually make it happen. Yeah. Anything else that you can share that you saw, or is there anything about the rabbits that we haven't said yet that you might have noticed?
They were fantastic and very talented individuals.
Yeah,
I've got to say that.
The running aspect of it is one thing.
No, to be honest, I didn't actually see any of the rabbits. I saw Anthony before and afterwards a tiny bit when he was filming, but like David, I saw him for 3 minutes and we're like, let's go for a beer. Yeah, that was him. That was the whole weekend. And Thomas, busy boy producing the race. So no, I didn't see their setup in real life. So I have no idea. I'm sorry. I'm not actually much use on technical stuff. No,
what you have provided has been fantastic. I love that you're able to give me little tidbits and I can be like, oh yeah, it's probably this or that. So this has been fun. I think it would be awesome to do this again after World's Toughest, because you'll have done all that technical stuff throughout the show.
Absolutely. I think so.
Any last thoughts on Morzine itself, from a technical standpoint and from just a personal standpoint?
From a technical standpoint, I'm certainly not going to criticize anyone, but I think the thing that you add to your live stream is your knowledge of the sport and understanding of how the sport works. And sometimes working with external production companies who are excellent at what they do, but it's their first time working with the sport, they don't have that knowledge of what the sport is or who it is or what's important or why this might be important. And that can sometimes mean something gets missed, which can be a little bit frustrating. And I don't want to say that they didn't do their job well, because they did, but that is something that has happened kind of. And you know what? OCR is chaotic. TV is chaotic, but OCR is chaotic. And the very first time I worked with the first studio, and I arrived there the night before, and they're going, everything's changing. The obstacles are changing. They can't tell me this. I was like, dude, it's okay. This happens. It's fine. Like, I am the queen of winging it. I am the queen of winging it. And it was all fine, but they were stressed because they didn't know anything about this sport, and they couldn't, what does this mean? What is this obstacle? What's going on? When you have that knowledge, whether you're on camera or you're a producer or you're a rabbit, it's going to give that safety and also inform what you're picking and what you're doing and what's important. Yeah, you might have a great production knowledge, you might know about sport, but it does help to know about this sport.
For sure. Like a lot of things, it's kind of a trinity of things that you need to make it superb.
Yeah.
You need rabbits that are fast and can operate cameras well. You need production connection, good connection and production software and all that stuff. And then, yes, you need knowledge of the sport itself to be able to know what kind of information is best to show on screen, which cameras are best to switch to at which times, what things are important to tell the commentators to talk about, and if they haven't already, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's all of that needs to come together, and we just haven't seen that yet. The Spartan coverage from
package, the
coverage from your is probably the closest that we've gotten to it.
And the other thing I'll say about Morzine was, it was an incredible event. It was an incredible event. Like, I know that they've been hosting an ultra in Morzine for a couple of years. I know Morzine is it's so easy to get to. Like, Thursday morning, lunchtime, I took my daughter to a ballet exam. Thursday late afternoon, I was on site in Morzine. From the UK to France in the mountains, like, it is super easy. The flight is nothing from anywhere in Europe, and the drive is an hour. But the town itself is, it's a ski town. It's gorgeous. It's a European ski town. It's going to be gorgeous. But the whole town gets involved, which is really nice. It's lovely for the athletes. But the production of that event was just top tier. It was so good. And the team behind it are super experienced, and they know what they're doing. The European team are good. They kind of brought in all the best players in terms of race production. But just everything from, like, the purple carpet, all the branding everywhere around the whole village. The finish line would read everyone's name as they came through with their country flag. It was clearly not a cheap event to put on, but a good event. And they had 1,000 people running the Ultra World Champs. They had 10,000 people over the weekend going through the race. Now, that doesn't sound a lot to Americans, because I know you guys have 8,000 people on a race weekend in the States, but that's big numbers here in Europe. And
it's big numbers here too.
It's big numbers. It was an incredible event. It was just stupid obstacles, ridiculous. They pulled out everything in their arsenal, and they designed it beautifully. And I kind of got onto Slack to the team that were working on Mammoth, and I was like, oh my God, this is lit a fire underneath me. We need to do this. And I think they're all just like, oh my God, Fran. It was, I would say, it's one of the top events that Spartan have put on that I have attended. And that includes OCRWC. And you know how much I love that event. It was beautifully produced, incredibly designed. It was just another level.
And it's something that we wouldn't have a good live stream without not only all the pieces that we just talked about, but without such a good race and good put together. Like, that's its own thing, with a giant crew of people putting on the race by itself.
Yeah.
So
it was really, really something else. And they announced at the weekend that it's going to be there again next year. That's where they're having the Ultra World Champs next year. I know it's a big journey for people from the States, but I mean, to be honest, once you get into Geneva, you've then got all of Switzerland, you're right next to Italy, and you've got all of France, south of France, and you can get up to Paris pretty easily. Like, there's a huge playground to explore. And that is one of my favorite areas of the country, that kind of Italy, Switzerland, France cross, triangle is one of my favorite areas of the world. So many incredible things to see in such a small space. It's a big trip, but it's a trip that's definitely worth it. Like, get that. If you hate ultra running, don't get that. But if you think you might want to do it, like, it was such a weekend. I'm exhausted, but still so excited. And seeing those events just remind me about the magnificence of this sport.
That's fantastic. Francesca, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're about to go record some more on the Fran and Carlo Get OCR Adjacent show. So if anybody listens to this and you haven't gone to the new OCR Report Podcast YouTube channel, it's not the OCR Report YouTube channel, it's the OCR Report Podcast is the name of the YouTube channel. That's where we've now got all of our podcasts, including this
adjacent YouTube channel.
And even all of the podcasts that come out through, all of this stuff goes out to that you can watch it on YouTube, listen to it on YouTube, and it goes out to YouTube Music, which is like, a music streaming / podcast streaming now. Now, you guys are working on getting your podcast, your shows out to podcast platforms as well. Not there yet, but you're working on it. So go to there, check out that show, subscribe, get those subscriber numbers up, and make Carlo and Francesca feel good.
Idiocy. It's pure idiocy every week. We do results, we do OCR news, and we do a lot of moronic chat. It's fun.
If you like just having a good time, head on over there. And also, if you don't listen to OCRWC Podcast and you're into OCR, what are you doing? Go check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.